guys, it's Angela, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 books from 2019. So before I get into it, I do want to apologize because my voice sounds kind of crappy. I am a little bit sick, but I wanted to film this video anyway because I have a lot of books that I'm really excited to talk about. So during the year of 2019, I read a total of 90 books, and I'm going to get more into like specific stats when I do my stat video, but I just wanted to say I've read 90 books and 45 of them are 5-star reads. So this year I've discovered so many new favorites, and overall it's been a really great reading year. Now, the 10 books I'm going to talk about today are in no particular order. I'm going to be counting down from 10 to 1, and the only book that is like in an order is the number 1 book, which was my all-time favorite book of the year, and I feel like a lot of you guys probably already know what that is, so if you want to guess, feel free to do so in the comments. So now let's get into my top 10 books of 2019. Starting off with number 10, Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. I absolutely loved this book. This is about a girl named Eliza who writes comics for this online web thing that she has going on, and she's the creator of this really well-known, well-loved comic called Monsters C. And she spends a lot of her time online talking to her online friends and doing that and whatnot. So she meets this boy named Wallace who is a huge fan of her comic, but her identity is kept a secret, so no one really knows it's her. And he actually writes fan fiction, and they start to become friends, and then Eliza's identity gets released, and it's sort of about her trying to figure out what to do with the situation before Wallace finds out. But the main thing that made me love this book is Eliza and her anxiety. I felt that the anxiety rep in this book was so good. We get to see Eliza have like a full-fledged panic attack, which as someone who does have anxiety was very relatable, and I just really loved to see it in this book, and I felt that the representation was done well. And overall, I just loved the book so much, and yeah, if you haven't read it already, I would highly recommend doing so. Actually, I'm not going to say I recommend every book on this video, because just know, if it's on this video, then I recommend it because it's obviously a top 10. And for book 9, we have The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. So I do want to say that I'm pretty sure this book was supposed to be released in January of 2020 and it got pushed earlier. So this was released in November of 2019, and the second book in the trilogy, The Wicked King, was released in January of 2019. So with that being said, if things had gone as planned, Wicked King would be right here and I'd be holding it up right now because that book was absolutely phenomenal. I don't think that it suffered the middle book syndrome or any of that. I thought it was stunning. But because Queen of Nothing got released early, I felt it would kind of be silly for me to put 2 books from the same series on this list, especially since they were both released in 2019. So for that, I'm picking The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black, which is the 3rd book in the Folk of Air trilogy. I absolutely loved this book, loved the second book, loved the first book. This trilogy is probably one of my favorite trilogies of all time. I loved it so much. Since this is the 3rd book, I'm obviously not going to talk about the synopsis, but the first book, The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, which I'm sure you guys already know about, is about a girl named Jude and her twin sister Taryn who are living in the realm of the Fae, but they're completely human. And as the title would suggest, there's a cruel prince named Carden who is really mean to Jude and sort of bullies her, but she sort of hits him right back. It's really good. I feel like I'm struggling to describe it and not doing it justice, but it's absolutely fantastic. And this book was a great ending to such a wonderful trilogy. For book number 8, we have A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. And I think this was the first book to make me cry in 2019. I read it in January. And this is sort of like a graphic novel, and it's a really quick read. It's about this boy named Connor whose mother has cancer, and he's really, struggling with it. And then this monster comes and visits him for a few nights and tells him 3 different stories, and it's just an absolutely phenomenal, heartwarming, but also heart-wrenching book, and there was so much wisdom in this book, and I loved it so much. You can honestly just read it in one sitting if you dedicate, an hour or so to do it, and I would highly recommend just doing that and just consuming the story all at once. I will definitely be reading this again in 2020, and I love it so much. Book number 7, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is an adult historical fiction novel about this woman named Evelyn and the story of her 7 husbands. And in this book, Evelyn, who's now present day, she's an older woman, asks this woman, Monique, to essentially write her biography and write the story of her life and her rise to stardom and her 7 husbands. And this book was absolutely fantastic. It gets a lot of hype here on BookTube, and the hype is so well deserved. If you haven't read it already, you need to read it. It is so good, and I couldn't have this list without this here. And book number 6 is Daisy Jones and the Six, also by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was really hard because I loved both of these a lot, and I was like, do I want to include 2 books by the same author for my top 10 list? But honestly, I just couldn't pick between the 2 because they're both so phenomenal. And Daisy Jones and the Six is about this girl, Daisy, who essentially joins this band called The Six. And Taylor Jenkins Reid, both with this book and The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, has this amazing ability to make you feel like what you're reading is actually real. Like, when I finished this book, if you had told me that Daisy Jones and the Six was an actual band, I would have been like, yeah, duh, like I just read the book. I mean, there were lyrics in this book. It was amazing. So this book is basically about the journey with the band, how they get together, and essentially their downfall. And it was so good. Both this and Evelyn Hugo are my favorite books of all time. They're on that list. They're absolutely fantastic. The audiobook for this is really good as well as Evelyn Hugo. But specifically Daisy Jones and the Six, if you have the opportunity, I would recommend listening to the audiobook while reading along. It definitely just heightens the experience, and it's amazing. Book number 5, The Hayden Game by Sally Thorne. This is an adult romance that I read in one sitting. It was that good. And I mean, it's not that short either, but it was that good that I read it in one sitting. This book is about our 2 main characters, Lucy and Josh. They're both assistant to the CEOs of different publishing companies, and they absolutely hate each other. And now they're both up for the same promotion, and they sort of have to fight to see who will actually get the promotion. This is an incredibly done hate-to-love romance. Absolutely fantastic. I love it so, so much, and I'm definitely going to reread it in 2020. Sticking with the romance theme, we have Heartstopper by Alice Oseman as book number 4. And now that I'm actually holding it up, I do realize that I also have 2 Alice Oseman books on this list, as well as 2 Taylor Jenkins Reid books, so they're doing good. Anyway, this is a super cute graphic novel about 2 boys, and it's basically a male-to-male friendship to romance, and it is so good and so cute, and this gave me all the feels, like so many more feels than I thought it would. Like, I'll put the emojis on the screen. That's my Goodreads review, because those basically just describe my experience reading this book. But anyway, I loved it so, so much. So book number 3, also by Alice Oseman, is Radio Silence. This book is about this girl named Frances who is obsessed with this podcast called University, and she actually draws fan art for it. And she's going to this new school, and at the school, she actually meets the person who goes by the fake name of Radio Silence, who's the creator of the podcast, but she actually meets him, and he doesn't know that she knows who he is, and she's in love with this podcast, but it's a friendship story and not a love story, and it says that right in the back, and I really liked that. And so yeah, it's basically about what happens after she figures out his identity and what happens for the future of the podcast and also their friendship. I absolutely loved this book, and I feel like I read this book at a time where I really needed to read this book. During this book, our main character is sort of unsure, and she sort of feels lost, sort of with everything, and I really related to that, specifically because during the year of 2019, I did change my major, and next semester I'm going to a university for a different major, and it's sort of been a lost feeling because I had this path for school, and now I've abandoned it, and I'm taking a new one. So I really related to this book a lot, and I understand why it's so loved. Specifically by Kat from Paperback Dreams, I read this book because I wanted to read her favorite book for one of the months of the year because I was doing the YouTuber favorites. And I get why she loves this book, and I get why everyone else loves this book. It's absolutely fantastic. And another book that I will be rereading. For book number 2, we have Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. During the year of 2019, I read a lot of adult thrillers and a lot of adult thrillers that I really enjoyed. And there were so many that have become new favorites, but for the purpose of only keeping this list 10 books, I had to pick one. So I chose Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. Now, if you've seen the Disney Channel original movie Smart House from like the 2000s, this is sort of like that, but a thriller. And it's about this girl named Rowan who accepts this nanny position at this house, which is essentially a smart house. And things start to go awry. And the three kids that she's watching aren't the best behaved, and it's just really difficult for her, and she's just really struggling. And this book is so creepy and so spooky, and I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook was fantastic. So if you haven't access to the audiobook, I would highly recommend that, because when the author said like creak, it was like creak, and it was just so creepy, and I loved it. But anyway, this book was absolutely fantastic and definitely my favorite thriller of 2019. And I'm so bummed because it unfortunately didn't win the Goodreads Choice Awards, which I felt it should have. But it didn't. But nonetheless, I know this book is super hyped, so I don't want to talk about it too much. And I've talked about it a lot here on my channel. But number 2. And now for the number 1 book of 2019, which has taken the place of my favorite book of all time. If you haven't already guessed, it's A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemner. Now, before I get into talking about this book, I do want to say, I did get an ARC of the second book, A Heart So Fierce and Broken, this year, and I have not finished it. And for that reason, it is not on this list. So please don't think that I didn't like the sequel, because I'm loving it so far, I just haven't finished it. And it's probably going to be on my 2019 list, just saying. So this story is a Beauty and the Beast retelling about a girl named Harper who has cerebral palsy. And this book is so important to me because, like Harper, I have cerebral palsy, and we have it to the exact same extent. So where she's only affected in, I think it's her left leg, I'm affected in both. And it was the first time that I was able to read a book and truly see myself, and it was just such an amazing experience. And it was the highlight of my year, and it was just so amazing, and I love this book so, so much. I know there's a lot of Beauty and the Beast retellings out there, but this is different. This is a different spin, and it's just so fantastic. I got the opportunity to meet Bridget at BookCon, and she's so sweet, and I've thanked her so many times for this book because it truly does mean the world to me. This book has inspired me to make a discussion video about disability and chronic illness representation in books, and how important it is for those disabilities and chronic illnesses not only to be represented, but to be represented well, and to also not always be the main focus of the story, because Harper's cerebral palsy isn't the main focus of the story. It's just a part of who she is, and it's a part of her character, and it makes her more realistic, and I really appreciated that. I definitely have more content coming out in 2020 inspired by this book. I will have a video coming based on Twitter, and I asked a bunch of people on Twitter what chronic illnesses and disabilities they would like to see represented in books. So I'm going to make a whole video all about that. But yeah, I love this book so much, and it's honestly no surprise that it is my number 1 book of 2019. So those are my top 10 books of 2019. If any of them sounded remotely interesting, I would highly recommend reading them. They're absolutely fantastic, and they've all become new favorites for me. Like I said, 2019 was a really good reading year, and it was also a really good year for me. My 1-year anniversary on BookTube is actually coming up January 1st because I sort of decided to start 2019 by making a BookTube channel and posting my first video. So the next video you'll see from me is going to be my first year BookTube outtakes, which I hope that you guys enjoy. I love outtakes, and so it was so fun to find all these moments and just stitch them together. So thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to let me know in the comments your top 10 favorite books of 2019 or just some of your favorites. And as always, have a good one.